What's up, y'all? Welcome to another episode of Sports Spectrum. It's Matt Forte here with Jason Romano and Jason today. I am delighted to talk to Michael McDowell, the NASCAR Daytona 500 winner back in 2021. Let's start with that, man. What is that like winning the Daytona 500? I can only imagine.
Well, I mean, you can't imagine. You know what it's like when you pour your entire life into something, and it's a lifetime achievement. It's like winning the Super Bowl. It's like winning a world championship. It's what you strive to do. And so that adrenaline rush and that pure exhilaration that you get from the moment is hard to describe to people. It really is because it's just different. It's different than when you have a child or when you get a job promotion or whatever it is. It's a different level of like instant adrenaline rush. Um, and so, yeah, it was an amazing time. It was, for me more than anything was the journey to get there. Like the journey has been a long one and a tough one. And so that just heightened everything so much more. Had it happened early in my career or right out of the gate, I wouldn't have appreciated it. I know I wouldn't have because I expected that. When I was young, I think to be a professional athlete and to be at the top of, any profession, you have to have that edge. And, I was cocky and arrogant young guy that thought I was going to win multiple championships and win lots of races. And it wasn't expected to me. I expected it. And then you go 15 years without that, and all of a sudden your perspective changes. The drive and the hunger didn't change, but your perspective changes. So in that moment I was able to experience it more than I think I would have if it would have happened early on in my career.
Yeah. That I want to ask you too, like when it comes to that, because as you mentioned, you put everything into it. What is the grind like when it comes to being a NASCAR, driver and a racer? Because the outside perception from some people could be that, I mean, you're driving a car fast. Like, how hard could it be? And
Yeah.
from the outside, and just like when you make things look easy, it's easy for outside in to say, well, what kind of
Yeah.
struggles could you possibly have? So, just talk about that a
Yeah.
little bit.
Well, I think that motorsports is different than other professional sports. It is, and it's hard to draw similarities. It really is because for you, and I don't know, I'm guessing because I wasn't an athlete, but for you, the grind is putting in more work and more time and, physically conditioning, nutrition, and understanding the game and film and watching and learning and all those things. And ours is different. It is different. Those, those are aspects that we still do. But for me, the struggle is that you're only as good as the race car you sit in, just like you're only as good as your teammates. It's the
Mm,
same in that aspect. But in order to have the fastest engine and to have the best tires and the best car and the most downforce, you have to have partners. You have to have sponsors. You have to have financial partners. So that's the grind that people don't see is that you could be the most talented driver in the world. Nobody will see it. If you're not sitting in a fast car, nobody will see it. Where when you're out on that field, if you have that raw talent, it's going to be exposed. People are going to see it. People are going to see your speed. They're going to see your agility. They're going to see your toughness. They're going to see how strong you are. And in racing, that's not the case. You're only as good as the car that you sit in. And so, the struggles is getting into a good seat with a good team, with good partners and sponsorship to be able to compete at the level that you want to compete at. And, no different than there's a disparity. Like people think, well, you're still racing, you're still going around in circles. Yeah, you might not be winning, but you're making a lot of money. Well, you're not. You're
hmm
not. I mean, for 10 years, I was hanging on for dear life. I mean, my wife and I, we traveled in our motorhome together and went from race to race. And when I didn't have my family with me, I'd sleep on other people's couches. And there was times I even slept in the rental car because I was too cheap to go get a hotel room and I didn't want to deal with it. And, so those are the things people don't see because they're like, well, you're racing on Sunday. You're one of the guys. Well, I was there, but I wasn't one of the guys. And so, just going through that. And then also too, the mental side of it is that my entire life I've won everything I've ever done. And you still have that when you get to the highest level, but when you get to the highest level, you're not a standout anymore. You're just one of. And so going into those weekends, knowing that you have no chance at winning, no chance at being competitive, but you're doing it because for me, there was a lot of reasons. One is I felt like I was called to do it. And so whether I liked it or not, I needed to do it. It's how I did provide for my family. And I dedicated my whole life to something. I have no job experience. I have no education. This is all I've ever done. And
Hmm.
so if this doesn't work out, what am I going to do? And that's the challenges that not everybody sees.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely the grind, and I wouldn't say cheap. I'd say wise. I say wise to sleep on the couch instead, especially if you're by yourself. It's like, am I going to be
Yeah,
bougie and get a hotel room, or I'm
yeah,
going to sleep on somebody's couch and save some money for the fam? So,
that's right.
uh, that grind goes into everything you do. You can see that the love for the sport pours out of you, and that you're not doing it for the stand on the stage and say, "Look at me, we did it." Because actually, there is a lot of similarities between that and a football team because you need unity. The teams that win Super Bowls have the most unified team on offense and defense. The coaches call the right plays in sync with the talent that they have, and then the training room. You got to have, if I always tell Jason, the best ability is availability. If you're not available to play, you can't do that. So there's a lot of unity. So when it comes to unity within the team, I mean, there's your pit crew, there's guys changing tires, there's the people working on the engine. There's a lot that goes into you showing up and being able to drive the car. What have you seen as far as the unity within the team that you've brought to the table? Like, how have you unified
Mm.
people and brought them together?
No, that's great. I think that, really this is what's become a little bit of my sweet spot is it started out of necessity. I'm not going to lie. It was out of, selfishness of trying to get the most that I could out of my career. And I knew I needed the right people around me to do that. And I knew that we were on a very limited budget to do that. And so I sort of learned and became resourceful of how to identify talent and how to identify the right talent to do the right job. Because there's a lot of qualified people. There's a lot of people that have the experience or the ability, but it's putting them in the right environment with the right people, like you're talking about. And that's harder to do when you have limitations on what you can spend and how many you can go get. And so for me, I had to learn how to be like super efficient on identifying those talent, who that is, and creative. I had to go after the people that have gotten passed over for that promotion that maybe have, been up and now they've been kicked down a little bit and they got a little chip on their shoulder and they got something to prove. And so for me, that was really what changed my career in, performance was just finding that core group of people that are willing to go to battle with you, that are willing to grind it out, that are willing to put in the extra hours and do the extra thing for less pay and less benefits and less opportunities, but had something to prove. And then when you come alongside them and you actually care about them, like you don't care about their performance, but you just care about them and their family and their character and who they are. And you start pouring into people, it's easy to build that unity. I always tell my guys like it's easy to be a jerk. Anybody can be a jerk. It's hard to care for people. It's hard to actually care for people when they're struggling and when they're going through rough times and standing beside them and helping them go through those things. And but when you do that, you build more than just a team. You build a family and you build that community that is willing to go to bat for each other and is willing to stand in the gaps. And so that's been really fun to see that actually turn into performance,
Yeah.
and it has. And so that's been really fun to see.
Yeah. And so, shifting gears now, where does Jesus come into play in this? Like, tell us. Ben Roethlisberger told us that you have a 30-second, elevator pitch testimony. You got to have a long one, and then you got to have one right in the middle. Give us that one right in the middle, your testimony of how you became to place your faith in Jesus, and
Yeah.
and then and then your calling. Like you said, you felt called to do this, to be a NASCAR
Yeah.
driver.
Well, so the middle version, middle length is I didn't grow up in a Christian home. I grew up with great parents. We didn't attend church. Religion wasn't really a part of my upbringing. but I had moral good roots, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And so I knew the difference between right and wrong. Now that's swayed by, your own personal beliefs. Obviously, as I was growing up, I figured that out as I got older. But for me, I wasn't really looking for God. I wasn't looking. I wasn't exploring. But God pursued me, and He pursued me through people, and He pursued me through two individuals that lives just looked a little different. They weren't really preachy. They just loved their families. They were good at what they did. They cared genuinely for people, and their lives looked different. And you could tell that there was something about them. I couldn't articulate that at the time, right? Because I didn't grow up in church, so I didn't know what that was. And so, fast forward, one of those individuals that mentored me was at a racetrack and was on a Segway scooter, hit his head, died a few days later. And at his funeral, I was challenged, whether I thought he was in heaven. And I didn't know what that really looked like. In my mind, as crazy as it sounds, like good people go to heaven. That's kind of how I placed it. I visualized growing up, in the 80s and 90s of All Dogs Go to Heaven. I don't know if y'all remember that movie as a kid, but I envisioned floating around in the sky and halos and these weird things. I had no recollection of what that actually looked like, and so I was challenged with, what about you? Where are you at? And I was 18, 19 years old at the time, and I'm not thinking about life. I'm not thinking about marriage. I'm not thinking about any of that stuff. I'm thinking about, how do I get to my next goal of making the next step in my career. And over the next 2 weeks, I was just challenged in every area of my life with that question of, what about you? Where are you at? And it wasn't about heaven or hell for me. It was like, where am I at? How did I want to be as a man? And how did I want to lead? And how did I want to be as a son and as a father? I had no kids. As a husband, I was challenged with all these areas in my life, and I thought I was losing my mind. I really did. I was like, what is going on? Like, why am I having all this internal wrestle? And I had a hard time figuring that out. And it was just God pursuing me. And so my wife and I, we've been together since we were 15. Her aunt and uncle invited us to church. And, I didn't really think much of it. I wasn't trying to seek God at this time. I was dealing with these weird things that I couldn't, figure out. But they promised us a good meal afterwards, and we liked hanging out with them. And so I was like, I can do anything. I can sit through this service. And it just felt like the pastor was talking right to me. And he was talking about God's grace, that it's a free gift and that you can't earn it. Everything in my life I've earned, and you can't work for it. Everything I have, I've worked for, and you can't buy it. And in racing, you buy it speed. You want to go faster, you buy it. And so it was this concept that was hard to wrap my head around, of that it's a free gift and that there's nothing you can do to earn it or deserve it. But what really stood out to me was the next line that he used is that you could have a clean slate and a fresh start. And with all the turmoil that I had over the last few weeks and all this wrestling, it was like, I knew that was for me. I knew that I wanted a fresh start and a clean slate. I didn't clearly understand the gospel at the point, but I knew that something was going on. I could feel it, and I knew that God was pursuing me in that moment, and that this was my opportunity for a fresh start and a clean slate.
Yeah, I love that verse when he says, in the New Testament, you've been saved by grace through faith, not under your own strength, so that no man can boast. Like,
Yeah,
God knows humans, His creation, so well that He was like, if this is not a free gift, they're gonna come up and be like, "Hey, Jesus, you saw what I did?
yeah,
You saw that? I helped save that guy." It's like, no, no, we can't do that, and it's so countercultural to everything sports wise or in life that you do when
yeah,
it comes to success. You try to earn it, you work, you study, you do all of this, but yet the free gift of God, man, it's
yeah,
amazing. So you said one thing that stuck out to me. You said you were pursued by through people, like
yeah.
God through people, and it wasn't preachy, it wasn't condemning. It was literally people being known by the fruit of their life.
That's right.
And
Yeah,
and 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 I just wanted to say, because people think that just because maybe their family grew up not going to church, or maybe they don't even have a relationship with God, but you said your folks were good people,
yeah,
and Moral morality, I think, gives us a pathway towards seeking Jesus in the right
That's
way. And
right.
he's so gracious that he gives us the time to really do that. And so, speaking of that, you know, how does discipleship come into play with you and your team and what you do, but your home team? You know, you
Yeah,
got
yeah.
5 kids, you're married, you got your husband, and I know my house is full with just, the 4 I have, and they're running around all crazy. But
Yeah.
uh, how does that come into play within your family?
Yeah, so I'll give you a little bit more background. So, after I got saved, I went on a journey of like really deep dive of trying to understand from a knowledge standpoint of who God was and who he says he is. And so I really started, digging into the Bible, like no background, no preconceived idea, didn't grow up in the church. So it was like fresh start, like literally open book, and I had a few people that I would, ask questions to that, gave me a Bible, or our pastor at the time when we started going to church, and I'd grill those guys. I'd hammer them all the time. And so my own personal discipleship was done through a little bit of just digging in, and I had to do that on my own terms and on my own time. And I've always kind of been a student, and so for me, like digging in was how I wanted to do it. And I got to a place where, man, it was like very, very real in every area. And what I mean by that is like, it's not the salvation part. I felt God pursue me. I felt saved in the moment. But for me, it was more of like, now what? Like, what does God expect from me? And what does this look like? And so I really leaned into that. And so, as I'm doing that, I'm getting married. God's removing things in my life. I'm removing things, personal choices that I'm making, and you're going through that process. And I just remember wanting to, grow in my faith and be a good husband. And I'm not a dad at the time. Um, but racing was still very separate for me. Of like, I didn't know how God was in that, and what I needed to release, and what I needed to hold on to at the moment. That's kind of how I was thinking about it. And so, short version, I got to a place through trials and through, your own consequences by trying to take things on yourself, of he wants it all, every area of your life, not just your professional area, not just your personal area, like every area. And he wants you to invite him into that space, every area, every interview, every conversation, every day. He is allowing us to invite him into it, not for his good, but for our good. Because left to our own, we will screw it up, right? And so, you go into the discipleship part of it, is that, as I grew in my faith and became passionate about, who God is, for me, it was like very black and white. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't the most tactful guy when it came to evangelism. Like, to me, I'm like, man, you're either alive or you're dead. Like, you're either alive in Christ or you're separated from him. And I love you, but I want you to know that truth, because it was, for me, it was that life or death decision. It was an eternal decision. It has to happen. And then as you grow and you mature, you know that it's on God's time, right? And
Hmm.
like, God's doing the work. You're not doing the work. You just got to be available. And so as I grew in that, I'm just like, I'm stopped pushing. I'm not pushing anymore. I'm just going to be available. And so, we all have unique gifts, and God uses us all in, different capacities. But it is very clear. Like, people go, man, I don't know what God has for me. Or, I don't know what my purpose is. Well, that's easy. You pick up your Bible, you know what your purpose is. Love God, love people.
Hmm.
What are the greatest commandment, right? Is
Yeah.
love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love others, right? And what are we supposed to do? Well, we're called to go make disciples. That's what we're called to do. It's no question about it. It's not, what should I do? This is what you should be doing. Now, you learn over time what that looks like, and you hit on it. First, it starts in your home, right? It starts in your relationship with your wife or your husband. It starts with your relationship with your kids. It's your inner circle. It's your immediate circle. You don't have to have a microphone, and you don't have to, be on the street corners. Like, you just start in your home. And I feel like strong homes make strong communities. and strong communities make strong states, and strong states make strong nations. And that's how the gospel spreads. It starts in a very intimate circle, and then that circle just spreads and spreads. And so, what does discipleship look like? It's looked different over the years. It's looked like, my wife and I, we've had home church. We've had 30 people every week in our home, doing discipleship. And then we've had it just her, me, and our son. And every season of life and every year looks different, and I think it's just being available. We were in a season, I have 5 kids, it's crazy, and a new team and all these things. And I'm like, man, I don't have time for anything else right now. There was other times in my life where I had a lot of time. And I'm just telling you a quick story. It was, just a few months ago. And, I wake up every morning. I know it sounds corny. I know it sounds cheesy. Listen, my quiet time is messy and inconsistent. I've had years where you look at my journal and you'd be like, this guy right here is next level. And then I got years where you go, I can count on my hands how many quiet times this guy's had, right? And so God is faithful, even when we're not.
Yeah,
And but one thing I do, man, my eyes open up. I say, Lord, thank you for another day. What do you want me to do? That's how I start my day. What do you want me to do? And so it's
absolutely.
just like this mindset of like, I'm available and I will miss it. So you just let me know what you want me to do. And so I walk into my shop, into my race team, and I just normal day. I'm gonna have my meetings, gonna do my things, not thinking about anything other than doing my job. And immediately make eye contact with one of my guys, and he just starts to break down. And like I know in my spirit of like, all right, Lord, this is what you wanted me to do today. That's why I'm here. And so I think it's discipleship is being available and knowing the word and being able to teach it is important. And the Bible says that we should be able to give a reason for what we believe in and why we're
Hmm.
saved. And so I think that that's an important part of our growth. But man, you don't have to be super polished and prepared. You just got to be available for those moments. There's hurting people all around us at all times. And
That's
so
right.
my wife and I just had this conversation because my wife and I, we've been together since we were 15. We are best friends. We are. And we're going to be married for 20 years. We just celebrated her birthday. I won't tell you her age, but we're the same age. We've been together for 25 years. And she's like, hey, I really think that, I need, I need the leadership from you spiritually to look like this with our kids. And I'm not offended by that. I love her. I know she loves my kids and I know she loves me. We've been through a mess together. And so that doesn't cut me deep. But, we were talking about scenarios because for her, she thinks it's really important, and I do too, to have that sit down time, that Bible time, that prayer time, and reading the word. I get it. And I said, look, I understand. I get it. We've had seasons of doing that. But I also like, we live it. We live it. We invite people in our home all the time. We're praying with people all the time. We walk through tough stuff with people all the time. You and I, we fight fairly. They see us fight fairly. They see us love each other well. This is discipleship. Like, what did
Hmm.
Jesus do? Yeah, Jesus did sit down and he talked to his disciples. He would give some sermons. The sermons really were more for the people, right? It wasn't necessarily for the 12. But what did they do? They just walked alongside of them and did life. They made fires and they broke bread and they hiked on their feet and they set up camp. And you know what I mean? And so sometimes people think that quality time is the most important. Quantity is the most important. Like your kids walking with you in that life, they're gonna see it. They're gonna catch it more than they're gonna be taught.
Hmm.
And so even though she's right, and I will step up, and I will be better. And but I just feel like it's so important for them to see you live out your faith organically. And maybe that's because that's how I was impacted, right? I was impacted by two guys that love the Lord, that love their families, and their lives look different. And so maybe that's the model that I'm trying to use. So yeah, that's what discipleship looks like.
Yeah, that's good, man. I mean, it's no mystery. We make it more complicated than it is. It's
Yeah,
literally uh, using what God has given you to go do what He told you to do, which
that's
was
right.
make
Yeah,
disciples. Like start there, because we always we get this idea, and then our human brain starts to work like, well, probably maybe I need to go and be this person first before someone will pay
yeah,
attention to what I'm saying to them. It's like, no, just go do it. Just go. as he
Yeah.
told the disciples to go. And it's interesting that it says, it always in the Bible, it says Lord and Savior. You know,
Yeah.
salvation is the free gift of God, which we were just talking about, but not
Yeah.
everybody wants the Lord part
Yeah.
because, I've heard, I heard a pastor say one time, saying no Lord is an oxymoron.
Yeah.
It's like that. You can't say, if it's your Lord, you can't say no. And that's when it comes to what we do. You gotta go and be that. And it starts in the home. So
Yeah.
I commend you and our wives, man. They're important. I think God obviously places them in our lives for an important reason, and it's to reprove us. It's to
Yeah.
refine us. Where you can't have a pride about you, where your wife can't say, "Hey, I see this. I need you to do this and be this in the home like
That's
this."
right.
So
Yeah. I think that that's probably been, for my wife and I, our most impactful ministry in the area is marriage, and we do a lot of marriage studies and marriage counseling and walk with, because of that theme is like, you you want to raise godly kids, it takes mom and dad,
yeah,
and if their relationship's not strong, and if they don't both love the Lord and they don't know what that looks like, then how are they going to model that? And so that's really been our focus point, just because it's in our sport, it's what struggles the most. Marriages are tough. I mean, we travel 40 weeks out of the year, and most wives are not traveling with their husbands, they're not traveling with their families, and so it's really really tough on the family unit. So it's a big commitment to be in this sport, and it's hard on everybody. But so is life, right? And so are our real jobs. And my wife and I talk about it often of like, man, we feel like we're in our own little bubble, but we're not. I mean, it's the same for everybody across the board. Whether they travel or not. The stresses and the pressure of life is real. So yeah, marriages are most important.
I appreciate you doing that because pro sports across the board and marriage is a place that I think the Lord is reviving, but it's a place that is deep in struggle.
Yeah,
The percentages across the board is definitely like 20 to 30% higher than the national average, which is already high because it's half of every marriage. So
yeah,
5 out of 10 are going to get
yeah,
divorced, but that's just the national average. But
yeah,
so I really appreciate what you're doing. Me and my wife are involved in that with PAO, Pro Athletes Outreach, and you know cultivating that community part where we can lean on each other
yeah.
and be able to create that trust factor. So wanted to ask you a little bit, speaking of your family and your kids, a little bit about the adoption story. How does that come into play? Because we've all been adopted by Christ,
That's right.
through his blood. So talk a little bit about the adoption story.
I think much like my wife and I both faith journey, it wasn't something that we were seeking out to do. I mean, it wasn't on our mind, it wasn't on our hearts. So my wife's always, from the moment I met her, she's wanted to be a mother. I mean, her first job was at a daycare. She was always babysitting, always watching. I mean, she just loves kids. There was just no way around it. I knew what I was getting into, right? I mean, as much as I want to say I didn't, I knew what I was getting into. And so we had our first son, Tracy, 16 now, and he was a difficult toddler for sure. And we were still traveling and we were struggling and things weren't going good. I mean, they just weren't. And but through that, we were growing in our faith, which I think you do through the trials. And I had more time, just because I wasn't in a high pressure, environment at the time, because I was, just barely hanging on, like call it third string. I was riding the bench and I'd show up for the workouts, but I wasn't having to do a whole lot. I was just kind of making it by. And so that gave us a lot of time. And so, just how it works, God just put people in our lives, or that was like, we met a couple that were adopting. We met another couple that are moving, to the mission field, and we met another couple they're adopting. This person works for this agency, and we're like, what is going on? Like, in a 6 week period, we met probably 10 families that some way or another are adopting and doing something. And like, we're like, well, maybe this is something that we need to look into. And so, we just started first just supporting some of them financially. And then our burden just kind of grew as we got more educated. I think that's the biggest thing is we just weren't educated. We didn't understand that there was a orphan crisis, and we didn't really know the magnitude of it. And so once you got involved and engaged, you start to see like, wow, it's insane. I mean, it's insane. At the time, there was, almost 200 million orphans across the world, and you're like, how is that possible? There's no way. It's not even a real number. So we just had a burden for it, and we just felt like the Lord was calling us to do it. We didn't know what that would look like. We just said yes. I mean, we really did. And the agency that we got with, they're like, "Where do you want to adopt from?" We're like, I don't know. Wherever the greatest need is, like we're not doing this because we want a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, girl. Who who's gonna die if we don't? I mean,
Wow.
that was kind of the heartbeat behind it. And so we ended up
Yeah.
in Ethiopia. We went in that program for 2 years, and there was, just international adoption can be messy, and it got shut down. And then we went into a new program, another program. So 6 years later, we ended up adopting from China and Lucas, and they make you fill out this you know form of would you be willing to accept somebody with this, and it was like the same thing of like I don't. I know if I say yes to all these, then I'm gonna get the absolute worst case scenario. But at the same time, my wife and I were just convicted that like that's what we signed up for. We said the greatest need, and we are not gonna check the box that we won't. And so we didn't. And so I was sitting there nervously waiting of like, what the situation's going to be. And Lucas, our son, it was the first file that was, referred to us. Same thing. I don't know. I don't know that we could have sat there and said, no, that's not a good fit. We were like, yep, that's him. And so, and it's been amazing. He was left on the street at 5 days old because
Wow.
he has missing digits in his hands and his feet. He's got cleft hands and feet, missing digits, and the culture is different there in China, right? And the boys carry the lineage for the family, just like biblical times, but defects or problems are not culturally accepted, and so he was left on the street just outside the hospital, and lived in the orphanage, from the first week on. So we got him when he was 3 years old, and he's doing awesome. I mean, he's great. Nothing stops him, and he's just a overcomer, and it's amazing to see. And like you said, like adoption is different. It's different than your biological kids. I know some people will frown on me saying that and understanding it's just different. It's a different thing. Like there's something instinctively wiring connection. I call it supernatural. It's supernatural. The connection that you have with your kids. And no different than it's different than the connection you have with your wife. I love my wife. My wife comes first in our house. Everybody knows that. But the amount of love or the connection that you have with your children, the amount of protection that you feel that you need for like all those things, it's just different. And so adoption is a choice, right? And it's a choice. And so the connection is different, but at the same time, God chose us, right? And like even while we were sinners, He chose us. And so that connection that we have with Lucas is different. It's I can't explain it in any way. There's areas that are deeper. There's areas that are tougher, that are struggles. But it's amazing, and it's just a reminder of God's goodness. Like we started that adoption process before he was ever even born,
Mm.
right? And like he's the great storyteller and weaver, right? Like our son Lucas's story was being weaved together 3 years before he was even conceived. And God knew that. He knew that he was going to be in our home before any of these things happened. And so for us, like the divine intervention that it took for all that to happen, allows us to just have so much freedom and grace and love in those moments because we know that this is, who God handpicked for our family.
Wow, man, that's so beautiful. It's, and you can see the joy, like when you smile when you say his name, and it's
Yeah.
just something. My family has a history of that too. When it comes to my
Oh wow.
grandmother was adopted, and many other people. As it happens, it's a lot of like in the black community, it's a lot of family adoption things like
Mm,
that where so and so is a cousin or a grandmother, and they just take somebody in, but. It's just a beautiful thing, and you never know how
yeah.
like God is already ahead of us in that time where He's working everything out, and He knows that it's going to happen. So, and then the international piece of it too, it changes your perspective. When you come back
Yeah.
home, you can tell your kids or even family members and things like, "Are we complaining about an iPad?
Yeah.
Well, kids over there don't have food, or they're on the
Yeah.
street, because they're despised just because of how they came into the world, which has no fault of their own, right?"
Yeah.
So it changes your perspective.
It
I've
does, and we call those first world problems
mhm,
in our house. And man, it's hard to foster here in America too. And those families, and we desperately need them. And Jamie and I, my wife and I, we caught a lot of flack for adopting internationally, and like you don't realize how opinionated and how um, I don't even know what the right word would be. I'll just leave it up there. Is we thought we were doing a good thing, and there's a lot of people like like, well, how could you, right? And so I think for us, it was about our own personal conviction, and I had this thought is that yes, there are terrible situations here in the United States. There's kids living in terrible situations, and we love them too, and I get it. But this is the thought that I had, right or wrong. This is the thought I had. But they have access to clean water. They can go turn that spigot on at any point
yeah,
out of somebody's hose, and it's clean water, right? Like that. We, when people, I mean, we live in the greatest nation in the world just because of what we have access to, even in poverty, what we have access to, right?
hmm
And so for us, we just felt like that wasn't what we were called to do. And then since then, I mean, we've had our eyes open at foster care. We've looked at crisis pregnancy situations and other things. So like once you start, it's hard to stop. But for us, we just felt like, man, there's a need that we don't understand that we can't really fathom.
yeah, yeah. Everybody will tell you what you should be doing
Yeah,
when they're
yeah,
not doing anything. So
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
I don't even listen to that. But
Yeah.
Jason, I know you got something.
Yeah, I want to just wrap this up here, Michael. I know you've given us so much of your time, and we're so grateful, especially in the middle of a racing season. I'll leave it at this. How can we be praying for you? What can our audience, not just Matt and I, but our audience listening, how can we be praying for Michael McDowell and his family?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one of those questions that always trips me up. I'll be honest with you, because when I'm like that I have that ego of I'm like, no, I'm the guy that's praying for people, right? Like I'm good.
Yeah.
But I know that that's not true, right? And the reality is like, man, what should we pray for? We're praying for my family, that we stay strong in the Lord, that we got 5 kids, and the odds are against you. I mean, they just are. Like you're battling the world, and so I want God to watch over and protect my kids and keep them from the things that we've tried to do our best to keep them from, right? And so to grow them in the Lord and to raise them up in a home that is safe and a home that will challenge you to go out and love others, right? And so for me, it's protecting that family unit in that home, and the just God will protect the platform that I have, not the microphone, but
Hmm.
man, I'm out there. Man, I've been out there, and I mean, the enemy comes to lie, steal, kill, and destroy, and there's
Yeah.
nothing greater that would give them more privilege than to see me fall flat on my face.
hmm
Mm-hmm.
And so to not be tripped up, to not do it, we see it happen. Pride comes before the fall, right? And so I know that if I don't got my guard up, it can easily all go away. So just continue to lean into that.
Matt, I love
Absolutely.
that you could have said a few more, wins this year on the track. That would have been
Yeah.
nice too. You could
Yeah,
have said anything else, but you went right to that, and I thought that was very poignant to me because I don't think anybody would have faulted you if if you did say, hey, some wisdom and some a few W's and just for the best for our team, which obviously you should pray for your team. but you went right to that, and I think that's really powerful. So
Well, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, that shows humility, and he's full of it. He's full of the humility part, and that shows why his you know platform has continued to rise. And we thank you for your time, man. And
Yeah,
we'll be
thank you.
praying for you and your family. The Holy Spirit will guard you guys and definitely cause you not to stumble.
That's
that's
right.
right.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you all for the time.
Hey, thanks for watching Sports Spectrum here on YouTube. You can click our next video, or you can check out our website, sportsspectrum.com.